The Prime Minister of Great Britain, Rishi Sunak, came out a couple of days ago. Last couple of days he said this, Buck. This is how far we've descended, I would say, not only in the United States, but also in Great Britain and in much of the Western democracies. Simply saying a man is a man and a woman is a woman is controversial. Listen to the Prime Minister of Great Britain.
And it also shouldn't be controversial for parents to know what their children are being taught in school about relationships. Patients should know when hospitals are talking about men or women. And we shouldn't get bullied.
Joe Biden wouldn't say that. Think about where we are as a country, that Joe Biden would never be willing to say a man is a man, a woman is a woman, and that's just common sense.
Yeah, this is how crazy things have gotten out. I mean, every time you start to dig into this and you look through the headlines, you'll see the language is ever shifting on all of this stuff too. I mean, I think a big part of it is not only to create conformity, meaning people will use certain words in order to show their obedience to the trans agenda, but also to create a degree of just confusion around the issue, so people don't even really understand what the heck is going on. When you start to refer to things like people who menstruate and these different terminologies that have become fashionable in recent years, which is insane. But this is something that is happening. It is happening really only in the West from what I can see.
Yes.
So it's really a Western phenomenon. And I do think it's not that it's in retreat in this country, but at least there's enough honesty around the issue that we're allowed to speak about it now. And there's a greater understanding of what the real end goals are. It's not just about being polite to people.
One of the funniest part of Matt Walsh's What is a Woman documentary, which I think is free, anybody can stream it now, that the Daily Wire did, is his trip to Africa. And when he tries to have a conversation with the African tribal leaders about the idea of the transgender community in the United States, and they are just in complete disbelief that such a thing could exist. Again, these are African tribal elders, I believe, that he's having the conversation with. It does, to your point to what an extent the woke mind virus is primarily a function of Western democracy. And I thought this was good too. Candace Owens, I don't know if she's pregnant with her second or her third child right now, but she was speaking on a college campus, and I saw this yesterday and I couldn't stop laughing about it. She's taking questions from the crowd. These are college kids primarily in the crowd. And one of them wants to know about how she would respond to people who feel very threatened by her very speaking on that college campus.
What do you have to say to the trans students on this campus who feel actively victimized by your presence here?
Life's tough. Get a helmet, man. I'm too pregnant for this. Next question.
If you didn't hear exactly what she said, she said, life's tough, get a helmet, I'm too pregnant for this. And the crowd just goes completely crazy. I mean, that clip, which you can share, I shared it. I'm sure we'll share it from Clay and Buck as well. It was just so perfect because you have somebody in the crowd standing up talking about, I guess the phrase she used, feel victimized by your presence. Originally, colleges and universities were created to explore all ideas and make sure that whoever emerged from them was more educated than they would be without going to college. And now we are coddling and cloistering and protecting these kids on campus from ever having to have whatever their preconceived notions are challenged in any way, which is the opposite of what true education should be.
I always think it's funny too, because there's no better advertisement for a conservative speech than the lunatics who show up to protest it.
Yes.
And there's no more effective post-speech marketing material than some 18-year-old who walks up there and says, my pronouns are, and, your words are like literally harming me and stuff like that. This is the best. I mean, they're helping every conservative who goes on campus. The more protesters and the more dumb questions, the more worthwhile it is and the longer it lives on the internet.
Do people on college campuses think other kids are losers now? And I mean, by which I mean, if you were the kind of person, when I was in college, and I was on college campus 97 to 2001 in Washington D.C. So it wasn't like I was in some, like rural, backwoods location where there might have been, some huge, red voting community, right? I was in Washington D.C., Northwest D.C. GW is a very, politically progressive school. Now they've done away with the word colonials, the mascot, because they've convinced themselves that it's somehow legacy of colonialism, even though we were the colonists, and people are dumb and kids need to be told that they're dumb sometimes. If you were triggered by a speaker who came on campus, everyone overwhelmingly on the campus would have been like, yeah, you're a total loser. Like, deal with it. The idea that you would be upset, I get the sense now, and I'm not on a college campus, so I don't know. I get the sense now that instead of being rightly called a loser for being unable to handle somebody who had a different opinion than you, that now the college community would coddle that person and say, oh, I feel so sorry for you. What can I do to help you mentally cope with the fact that someone on a college campus is speaking and has a different opinion than you do? I don't know, because I'm not on a college campus and I frankly don't spend much time on college campuses. I don't know if we're hearing from a tiny subset of the overall campus population, and most college kids would be like, if you think you're a victim because somebody's speaking on campus, you're a loser, and that culture would still exist, like, get over yourself, or whether this victimhood ideology has become so prevalent that other kids feel bad for that kid. You know what I'm talking about? Like, what is the culture?
I think it's dominant that they would feel bad for the kid. I think the colleges, from what I can see, and I don't even know when the last time I set foot on a college campus. But from what you can see and what you hear, I think that the schools are as woke as they've ever been.
The administration certainly would be. I'm just talking about if you're a random sophomore on the campus right now, you would feel bad for that person who felt victimized, and you would be let me help you mentally cope with this challenge of someone having a different opinion than you.
I could speak to people I know who have been in grad school in more recent years. Other than that, I got to reach back some years. And they would say that these places have become, the indoctrination stretches far and wide, and they've become very, very woke. And the student bodies go along with it. I feel like it used to be, and you and I both love the movie PCU from the 90s.
Yeah.
It used to be a very noisy, aggressive, and powerful political minority on campus, whether it's, what do you call them?
Oh, back in the day, it would have been politically correct universe, right? I remember, this is in my book, Buck. Somebody a few years ago went back and looked. I wrote a letter to the editor. This was in the badass that I was, 1997 school newspaper. It's still up there. You can go look it up. But there was a huge controversy at GW in 1997 because an administrator used the phrase rule of thumb. And
that's how wide the stick is you hit people with or whatever?
Yes. Yeah. So, but some student wrote a huge piece in the newspaper, like, about how offensive it was that that an administrator would use the phrase rule of thumb, and how there needed to be consequences based on the language that he chose. So that existed in the 90s, but I feel like people were like, yeah, that is such a loser opinion. Like, people would just kind of roll their eyes at it, even at a school like GW. And now that opinion has become ascendant on some level, because that's how you end up changing the name of the university from Colonials, when it's the George Washington Colonials because George Washington was the head of the colonial army, right? This is not a crazy difficult thing to understand. And we were the colonists fighting back against the rule that was being put upon us by the British. So we're actually opposing colonialism. But because colonialism and colonists and the colonial army get dumb people confused, I don't even know what GW's mascot is now, but they did away with it. And so it's that ascendant stupidity, and I just don't know if it actually is still just like a squeaky wheel, or whether the student bodies by and large overall would agree with what that protester was saying during the Candace Owens speech.
I don't know if we have anyone who works on a university campus right now, or if we have any college age kids listening. We certainly usually do. I would guess that in most, look, it's different in maybe different regions of the country. If you're talking about a well-known like Northeastern school, if you walk around the campus of Yale or Georgetown, I think 70% of the kids on the campus probably go along with, at some level, the left-wing craziness. 70% sounds like about the right number to me. 30% are like, this is stupid. That's my guess.
And then the question that is out there, Buck, is, do these people, these kids who are obviously smart, I mean, they're not unintelligent if you are getting into Georgetown or you're getting into Yale or Harvard or whatever else, do these kids when they're like 30 suddenly realize how stupid they were when they were 20? Or, and this is my concern, do we live in such a post-fact world that once you identify yourself as a member of the left-wing coalition, you will defend those propositions no matter how insane? Because, look, I mean, it's controversial now for Rishi Sunak in Great Britain to say a man's a man, a woman's a woman. Our own president wouldn't even say that.